The night sky burned with streaks of silver as the alien shuttle tore through the atmosphere. And inside it, Princess Liren felt her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Her hands gripping the harness as alarms screamed around her, the world twisting in violent flashes of red light and metal groans. She had always feared humans, feared their stories, feared the terrible things her people told her about them. But she never imagined her first encounter with them would begin like this. With fire, chaos, and a crash she might not survive. The shuttle slammed into the forest floor with a thunderous roar, and everything went dark for a moment, leaving her senses numb and her breath shallow as she lay still in the shattered remains of her vessel. Smoke curled from broken panels. Sparks danced along torn wires, and outside, cold wind whispered through strange trees she had never seen before, each sound reminding her she was far from home alone, and surrounded by the species she feared the most. When she opened her eyes, she winced at the pain in her side, feeling the warm trail of blood that trickled down her arm, and for a moment she wished she had died in the crash rather than face the nightmare her elders had described so many times. Humans, the ancient stories said, were dangerous, brutal, and wild, human males especially, creatures who dominated their females, consumed them after mating, and cared only for violence and conquest. She had heard those tales since childhood, whispered in dark halls by older princesses who warned her never to fall into a human's hands, because no one returned from them alive. Liren tried to stand, but her legs trembled and the world spun, forcing her to drag herself toward the broken doorway of the shuttle, each movement sending sharp pains through her body as she fought to escape before the humans found her. She didn't know that someone had already found her. Evan Rhodes, human soldier, survivalist, and the last man she ever thought she would meet, knelt quietly near the tree line, watching smoke rise against the moonlit sky as his visor scanned for life signs from the wreck. He had seen crashes before, seen ships torn apart by storms or war, but this one felt different, heavier somehow, as if fate itself had guided him to it. When he approached the ruined shuttle, he expected danger, maybe traps or hostile survivors, but instead he found her, a fragile figure with silver-blue skin, glowing markings, and frightened eyes that still shimmered even through the pain. She lay half-conscious, trying to crawl away from the flames, and for a moment Evan simply stared, struck by her beauty and the quiet desperation in her movements. Then training kicked in and he rushed forward, lifting debris with his bare hands, clearing a path, and finally kneeling beside her as he gently touched her shoulder. Liren felt the touch like a surge of fear through her body, her eyes widening as she gasped, trying to scramble back, her voice barely a whisper as she forced out a trembling plea. "Don't eat me, please." Evan froze, stunned, his mind unable to process what he had just heard as he stared at her in confusion, wondering what kind of torture or propaganda she had been taught to believe. He didn't know who she was, didn't know what species she belonged to, but he knew fear when he saw it, and the terror in her voice hit him harder than any battlefield memory he carried. "It's okay," he said softly, raising both hands to show he meant no harm as rain began to fall around them, soft droplets hissing against the hot shuttle wreckage. "I'm not going to hurt you, you're safe. I promise." Liren's breathing shook, her mind racing as she searched his face, trying to see the monster her people described, but instead she saw something impossible, something gentle, something human. His eyes weren't hungry or violent. They were worried, calm, focused entirely on her safety, and that confused her more than anything else. She didn't understand why he wasn't dragging her away, why he wasn't baring teeth or growling or doing whatever human males supposedly did before consuming their females. Evan carefully lifted her, wrapping his jacket around her trembling body, and the warmth shocked her, a kindness she didn't expect from a species she believed to be made of cold instinct and primal hunger. She wanted to push him away, scream, fight, anything, but her strength was fading, her vision blurring as his arms held her with surprising gentleness, as he carried her through the dark forest toward the small human shelter hidden within the trees. Liren rested her head weakly against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and she wondered why a creature as feared as a human male would risk himself to save her. The wind whispered around them, the night deepened, and the glowing symbols on her skin pulsed softly like distant stars. Evan didn't know her name, didn't know her fears, didn't know that she came from a world where humans were described as demons, but he knew he couldn't leave her to die in the wreck, not when he had the power to save her. As the shelter door closed behind them, the warmth of the place wrapped around her, and exhaustion finally pulled her into unconsciousness, her last thought a frightened echo in her mind. Why had the human not eaten her? Why had he saved her life instead? What kind of creature was he if not the monster she had been taught to fear all her life? Loren woke to the soft hum of human machines and a dim golden light that warmed the small shelter. Her breathing slow and unsteady as she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling above her, feeling a heavy blanket draped across her body. For a moment she forgot where she was, forgotten the crash, forgotten the human who carried her through the storm. But then the memory hit her like a cold wave and fear rushed back into her chest as she pushed herself upright with trembling arms. The room was small but strangely comforting, filled with quiet beeps, stacked supplies, metal shelves, and a gentle warmth that seeped into her chilled skin. And she could smell something human, a scent she had never known before. Earthy, warm, and confusingly calm. Her eyes darted across the room until they landed on him. The human male sitting in a chair near the door, his head lowered slightly as he cleaned a small device with slow, focused movements. Evan looked up when he felt her gaze, his brown eyes soft and steady, not sharp or predatory the way her elders always described human males. And when he spoke, his voice carried none of the cruelty she expected. "You're awake," he said gently, standing but not coming closer, letting her see he wasn't a threat. "You're safe here. I promise." His kindness frightened her more than anger would have because she had no way to understand it, no way to fit it into what she was taught. Loren clutched the blanket closer, her glowing markings dimming with anxiety as she whispered, Why did you bring me here?" Evan set the device aside and folded his arms casually, careful not to appear forceful. "Because you were hurt, your ship was burning. I wasn't going to leave you out there." She swallowed hard, her voice shaking as she said the words that haunted her since she woke. "Are you going to consume me?" Evan's face twisted in shock again, the same disbelief she saw in the forest, and he exhaled slowly as he ran a hand through his hair, clearly confused and troubled. "No," he said firmly, stepping back instead of forward so she wouldn't feel trapped. "Humans don't do that, not to our females. Not to anyone." Loren stared at him with wide, fragile eyes, her hands trembling as she hugged herself tighter, trying to understand why he denied something her people believed with absolute certainty. "I heard stories," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stories of human males eating their females after bonding with them. Stories of violence and hunger and cruelty." Evan almost laughed out of disbelief again, but he stopped himself when he saw the fear in her expression, and instead he took a deep breath and said softly, "Those stories aren't true, not even close. Someone lied to you. Someone wanted you to fear us." Loren lowered her gaze, remembering the strict lessons in the royal hall, the warnings etched into her childhood, the fear passed down through generations, and a small part of her wondered if she had lived her whole life under a shadow built from lies. Evan walked to the corner of the room and grabbed a small bowl of warm broth, placing it gently near her without stepping too close. "You should eat, you lost a lot of blood. You need strength." She hesitated, staring at the bowl as if it held poison. But her hunger gnawed at her and the aroma was soothing, so she took a cautious sip, feeling warmth spread through her body like a calm wave. Evan watched from a respectful distance, noting how she flinched at every movement he made, and he wondered what horrors her species had been told about his kind. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked softly, hoping to build trust one small step at a time. She hesitated before answering, her voice soft as wind. "Loren?" He smiled faintly, not the threatening baring of teeth she expected, but a gentle expression that surprised her. "I'm Evan." She repeated the name under her breath, tasting its shape, finding it strangely pleasant. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile, and for the first time since the crash, Loren found herself studying him instead of fearing him. The way his shoulders were broad yet relaxed, the way his eyes carried both strength and sorrow, the way he kept his distance as if he was afraid of frightening her. Humans were supposed to be violent, but this one felt more like a quiet storm that protected instead of destroyed. "Why did you not attack me?" she finally whispered. "Why did you save me?" Evan's eyes dimmed with a memory she couldn't see, a memory filled with its own pain, and his voice softened as he answered, "Because I know what it feels like to be helpless. I couldn't walk away from someone who needed help, even if she was alien." The vulnerability in his voice unsettled her more than aggression ever could, because it made him feel real, not like the monstrous image her people painted. A faint rumble echoed outside, distant thunder rolling across the sky, and it reminded her that the world was still dangerous, still searching for her, But for the moment she was alive only because a human male chose compassion over cruelty. She looked at him again, longer this time, noticing the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, the faint scar across his jaw, the weariness in his posture, and she wondered how many battles he had fought and how many losses he carried behind his calm eyes. For the first time she whispered softly, "Thank you." Evan's expression softened in a way she didn't expect, a warmth spreading through the small shelter that she felt down to her bones. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet moment, born from fear and kindness, would change both of their destinies forever, and the galaxy would one day speak of it as the spark that started everything. Liren sat quietly on the small bed, her glowing markings shifting with slow waves of soft light as she tried to understand the human who had saved her, and every passing minute made her wonder what else her people had lied about. Evan moved around the room with calm purpose, checking supplies, adjusting equipment, and preparing medicine, always careful to keep his movements slow so he didn't trigger her fear again. She watched him closely, studying every gesture, every breath. Every moment he glanced at her with gentle eyes that felt nothing like the monstrous cruelty she had been taught to expect. When he finally turned toward her, she stiffened instinctively, but he only crouched a few feet away and spoke in a steady voice that carried a strange warmth. "You're healing quickly. Your species must have strong biology." Liren didn't answer at first, because her mind was still wrestling with the confusion of what it meant to trust a human, but her voice finally escaped in a soft whisper. "We heal fast when we feel safe." Evan blinked, surprised by her honesty, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest when he smiled gently, a smile not driven by hunger or dominance but by something warm and real. "What else did they tell you about humans?" he asked quietly, not mocking her, but genuinely wanting to understand the fear she carried. She hesitated, her fingers curling around the blanket as her markings dimmed with embarrassment. "They said humans are violent creatures who use their females like prey, that human males consume their partners after bonding with them, that your species knows only war and hunger." Evan's expression hardened in a different way, not with anger toward her, but with anger toward whatever empire had fed her these lies, and he exhaled slowly to keep his frustration from showing. "That's not who we are," he said, his voice low but steady. "Humans protect their partners. We build families. We fight only when we must, not because we enjoy it." Liren lifted her gaze, confusion stirring through her chest as she asked softly, "Then why do so many species fear you?" Evan looked away, his eyes growing distant as if he was staring into memories she couldn't see. "Because we're unpredictable when cornered, because we rise when others expect us to fall, because we don't die quietly." There was no pride in his voice, no arrogance, only a quiet truth forged by loss and survival. And Liren felt a tremor of understanding ripple through her. For a moment the room fell silent, filled only by the hum of the heater and the soft breathing of two beings trying to bridge a gap that had existed for generations. Then Liren spoke again, her voice low with hesitant curiosity. "If humans do not consume their females, then what does bonding mean to your kind?" Evan froze, startled by the question, and his ears warmed slightly in a way she didn't understand. But he answered with sincerity, "Bonding for us means trust, loyalty, choosing someone to stand beside for life. It means partnership, not dominance." The words felt heavy inside her chest, heavy in a good way, heavy like truths that could reshape the world she came from. "On my world," she said quietly, "bonding is arranged, decided by law, not by emotion. We do not choose. We obey." Evan frowned, sensing the pain hidden beneath her calm tone. "Does that mean you never get to decide who you want?" Liren lowered her head, her silver blue hair falling around her face like a soft curtain. "Princesses never choose. We belong to the Empire. Our hearts are not ours." Those words struck something in him, something deep and unspoken, and he took a slow step toward her before stopping himself out of respect. "That sounds like a cage." She flinched at the accuracy of the word because she had never said it aloud, never admitted it even to herself. "A golden cage," she whispered, "but still a cage." A soft rumble echoed outside, the sound of distant thunder or perhaps the distant engines of patrol crafts searching the forest, and Lyren's breath caught in her throat as her markings flickered in fear. "They will come for me," she said, her voice trembling. "My people will think you captured me. They will think you corrupted me." Evan raised his head at the word. Confused? Corrupted? She nodded slowly, clutching the blanket tighter. "If I speak well of humans, if I question the old stories, they will say you infected me with human influence. They will believe I am no longer pure." Evan felt a heaviness settle in his chest, a protective instinct rising inside him like fire. "Lyren, no one has the right to own your thoughts. Your questions are not corruption, they're freedom." Her throat tightened at his words, as if they touched something fragile inside her that had been quietly starving all her life. For a moment their eyes locked and she saw no hunger, no threat, only a steady strength that made her feel less alone. But the moment was shattered when the scanner on the shelf began to beep, a high, sharp tone that sliced through the quiet room like a warning blade. Evan's expression darkened instantly as he rushed to the monitor, his fingers dancing across the screen while Lyren felt her heart climb into her throat. "What is it?" she whispered, her markings flashing with rising fear. Evan didn't turn around, his voice low and tense. "Multiple life forms approaching from the north, too many to be animals, they're moving in formation." Lyren's breath caught as realization struck her. "My people." Evan clenched his jaw, every instinct in him sharpening. "And they're not coming peacefully." Her pulse raced, her fear rising like a storm tide, because she knew what her people would do if they found a princess alone with a human male, especially one she had begun to trust. "They will kill you," she whispered, her voice trembling with dread. "Evan, they will not listen. They will think you tainted me. They will execute you on sight." Evan finally turned toward her, his expression firm, steady, unshaken. "Let them come. I'm not abandoning you." The words hit her like a second heartbeat she didn't know she needed. And in that fragile, breathless moment, Lyren realized the stories about humans were wrong, terribly wrong, because this human male wasn't a monster at all. He was willing to die to protect her. And that truth terrified her more than any lie she had ever been taught. The forest outside roared with distant engines as Lyren felt the shelter tremble beneath the weight of approaching forces, her glowing markings flickering like frightened stars as she pressed a hand to her chest. Trying to steady the storm inside her, Evan killed the lights with a quick motion, plunging the small room into a soft, tense darkness where only the faint glow of Lyren's skin illuminated the corners, casting ghost-like reflections on the metal walls. The silence between them stretched thin, sharp enough to cut, broken only by the soft hum of the life support unit and the rhythmic pounding of her heart echoing in her ears. Evan moved with quiet precision, grabbing a small pack, checking a compact weapon, and sliding a secondary battery into the shelter grid, each movement smooth and controlled, the motions of someone used to danger, someone who had known fear before and learned to stand against it. Lyren watched him with trembling breath, torn between awe and terror, because every lesson she had ever learned insisted humans were unpredictable and violent. Yet this human's calm strength made her feel safer than anyone in her own empire ever had. "They're close," Evan whispered, his eyes scanning the small display near the door. "Too many for me to fight head-on. We need to move." Lyren swallowed, her voice barely more than a breath. "If they see us together, if they think you touched me, they won't ask questions. They'll strike without hesitation." Evan looked back at her, his expression steady, unshaken. "I know." The simple words carried a weight she didn't understand, a courage she had never seen in any being before, and it made her throat tighten with a strange, painful warmth. "Why would you risk this?" she whispered, stepping toward him with hesitant feet. "Why would you put your life in danger for someone you barely know?" He paused, his gaze meeting hers in the dim half-light, his voice low with truth. "Because I don't abandon people who need help. Not after what I've seen, not after what I've lost." Something in his tone told her there was a story buried deep beneath his calm exterior, a wound carved into his soul long before she crashed into his life. But this was not the moment to ask. The ground shook again, more violently this time, and the scanner beeped with a sharp, urgent pulse that quickened Lyren's fear. Evan grabbed her hand gently but firmly, a touch meant only to guide her, not control her, and the warmth of his skin shocked her, sending a rush of unfamiliar electricity through her body. "We go out the back," he murmured, nodding toward a narrow maintenance hatch behind the heater. "If we're lucky, they'll check the front first." Lyren hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because she knew what her people were capable of, knew how quickly they would turn her fear into war, her confusion into punishment, her presence with a human into a crime. She looked at him with trembling eyes. "Evan, if they capture us, they will execute you without mercy." He squeezed her hand softly. "Then we won't let them capture us." His confidence frightened her more than the threat outside, because it sparked something inside her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. Together they crouched near the hatch, and Evan turned the manual lock with slow, careful movements, lifting the narrow door just enough to reveal the cool night air whispering through the opening. Rain fell softly outside, brushing against the leaves in delicate patterns, creating a curtain of sound that masked their footsteps as they slipped out into the forest. Lyren winced as her injured leg touched the ground, but Evan was instantly beside her, slipping an arm under her weight with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded weakly, though her voice shook. "I can walk. With you." They moved through the trees together, shadows shifting around them, the glow of searchlights slicing through branches in the distance as alien patrol ships scanned the area for signs of movement. Evan kept her close, his senses sharp, his posture angled protectively between her and the danger approaching from all directions. Lyren felt guilt twist inside her like a blade, because every step he took for her was a step closer to his own death. Yet he never once hesitated, never once looked back as if regretting his choice. A sudden flash of bluish-white light cut through the forest, followed by the sharp metallic hiss of alien boots touching the ground, as a squad landed nearby, their voices echoing in the crisp air with commands spoken in her native tongue. Lyren froze, her entire body trembling as she heard the familiar language, each word heavy with authority and suspicion. "They've found the wreck," she whispered, her markings dimming with dread. "They'll spread out. They'll track us." Evan tightened his grip on her waist, pulling her gently behind a fallen tree. "Then we move fast and we stay quiet." Through the gaps in the branches, Lyren could see her people, tall, armored figures with glowing armor plates and luminous weapon cores, their movements precise, their formation flawless. She had always been proud of them, proud of her empire, proud of her lineage. But now she only felt fear, because she knew exactly what they would do if they found her with a human male, whose closeness had already begun to melt the walls she had built around her heart. "Evan," she whispered, her voice breaking, "if they see us like this, they'll arrest me, they'll kill you, and they'll call it justice." Evan's jaw tightened, his breath steady, his heart unshaken. "I don't care what they call it. I'm getting you out of here." Her chest tightened with emotion she couldn't name, a trembling warmth that spread through her limbs as she looked at him in the darkness, lit only by rain and moonlight. For the first time in her life, someone, a human, the very species she feared, stood between her and death without asking anything in return. And as the alien soldiers moved closer, cutting through the forest with lethal precision, Lyren knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. Rain dripped softly through the leaves as Evan guided Lyren deeper into the forest. His steps silent but urgent, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows for any sign of the approaching alien squad. And every breath she took felt heavier than the last as fear twisted inside her like a tightening spiral. The forest seemed alive with tension, each branch trembling under the weight of passing search drones, their blue light sweeping through the darkness like cold, searching eyes that threatened to expose everything she was trying to protect. Evan pulled her behind a wide trunk, lowering himself beside her as a drone passed overhead, its engines emitting a low hum that vibrated against her skin, and she clutched his sleeve unconsciously, terrified of what would happen if they were seen together. When the drone finally drifted away, Evan looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "We're running out of time." Loren nodded, her breath shaking, because she knew he was right. Her people would not stop until they found her, and once they did, their judgment would fall without mercy. She swallowed, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Evan, you should leave me. They won't harm me, but you. If they see you with me, they will execute you." He stared at her with a steady determination that made her heart tighten. "I'm not leaving you, Loren. Not when you're scared, not when they're hunting you like a criminal." She grabbed his wrist gently, desperate to make him understand. "You don't know my people. They follow the old laws, laws written in fear and power. They believe any alien influence is corruption. They think humans are a danger to our purity." Evan gave a faint, humorless smile. "Seems like I've been called worse." But Loren shook her head, her eyes shimmering with fear. "They will not let you speak. They will not let me explain. They will only see a human male who touched an alien princess, and they will assume the worst." The idea of losing him sent a sharp ache through her chest, an ache she didn't understand yet. But it felt as real as the storm around them. Before she could say more, voices echoed in the distance, deep, commanding voices speaking in her language, and she stiffened instantly, pressing herself closer to the tree while Evan leaned forward, ready to move at any moment. The squad was closer now, much closer, and she recognized the lead commander's voice, a cold voice she had heard many times in the palace halls, General Valerius. Her breath faltered as she whispered, "He's the one who trained the royal guard. He never bends, never hesitates if he finds you, Evan. He won't give you a chance." Evan nodded, not with fear but with resolve. "Then we stay hidden, we stay smart, and we stay alive." They moved again, slipping between thick branches, stepping over fallen logs, each movement slow and careful. But Loren's leg began to tremble, pain spreading across her muscles until she finally stumbled, her knees hitting the wet ground with a soft thud. Evan was instantly beside her, crouching, his hands holding her shoulders with gentle strength. "Loren, talk to me. Are you hurt?" She shook her head weakly, though her body shook with exhaustion. I'm slowing you down." Evan brushed wet hair away from her face, his touch warm even in the cold rain, and his voice softened in a way that made her chest grow warm. "You're not slowing me down, you're the reason I'm moving." Her breath caught at the meaning behind his words, a meaning she didn't know how to hold, a meaning her people never allowed her to feel. Before she could reply, flashing lights lit the trees behind them, bright and sharp, followed by the heavy thud of boots hitting the ground as more soldiers landed. Evan pulled her into his arms with a quick, desperate motion, lifting her gently as he whispered, "Hold on to me." She wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart pounding against his chest as he moved through the dense underbrush with the strength of someone who refused to let fate decide the outcome. The forest opened suddenly into a rocky clearing, and Evan stopped at the edge, scanning the terrain before ducking behind an overhang, shielding her from view as the squad spread out across the path they had just crossed. General Valerius's voice echoed across the clearing, sharp and cold as a blade. "Find the princess. She is injured. She cannot have gone far, and remember, if the human is with her, shoot on sight." Loren felt her breath break inside her chest as she pressed closer to Evan, her markings dimming with fear, but his arms tightened around her protectively, grounding her in a way no one had ever done before. He whispered near her ear, his breath warm despite the cold. "They won't touch you, Loren, not while I'm breathing." Her eyes burned with emotion she could barely contain, a painful mixture of fear and something else she didn't dare name. She looked up at him, rain dripping across his jaw, his hair damp, his expression fierce and unyielding. And she realized he wasn't just protecting her because he wanted to save a stranger. He was protecting her because he chose her. Because somewhere between fear and confusion, a bond had begun to form, fragile but undeniable. A bond her people would consider corruption, a bond her laws forbade, but a bond she suddenly could not bear to lose. Voices grew sharper as the soldiers moved closer, their scanners sweeping the area in bright arcs of light. and Liren gripped Evan's shirt with trembling fingers as her whole body leaned into his for safety. "Evan," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion she could no longer hide. "Please don't die because of me." He looked at her, and in the soft glow of her markings, his eyes held a quiet, painful truth. "I'd rather die protecting you than live knowing I abandoned you." Her breath trembled, because no one in her entire life had ever said words like that. And in that suspended moment, as the rain fell in silver streaks and soldiers closed in from every side, Liren understood something terrifying and beautiful. She didn't want to lose him. Not to her people, not to their laws, not to their lies. And she didn't know how to stop what was coming. But she knew she would fight fate itself if it meant saving the human who had already changed her destiny. Cold rain fell like silver threads as Evan pressed himself and Liren deeper beneath the rocky overhang, his breath steady but eyes sharp as he listened to the alien soldiers sweep across the clearing, their footsteps heavy and precise, echoing like distant drums through the storm-soaked forest. Liren clung to him, her markings dimmed to a soft glow, her pulse racing as she felt the vibrations of her people moving closer. Each step a reminder that everything she had known, every law, every teaching, every fear was hunting her down, hunting him down. And the weight of it pressed against her chest like a tightening vice. Evan shifted slightly, adjusting his grip around her without letting his movements betray their location. His warmth steady against her chilled body, his voice a whisper barely louder than the falling rain. "They're spreading out, they'll search every corner. But we still have time." Liren's breath trembled as she whispered back, "Time for what?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, his eyes filled with a determination so calm and powerful that she felt something inside her melt and break at the same time. "Time to get you away from here. Time to keep you alive." A deep ache spread through her chest because she could hear the unspoken truth in his voice. He didn't know if he could save himself. "Only her." "No," she whispered, shaking. "Evan." "I can't let you die for me, please. You don't understand how my people think. They will not spare you, not even if I beg." Evan's jaw tightened, and he cupped her cheek gently with a hand calloused from years of battle she had never seen. "You think I'm afraid of dying?" The softness in his voice struck her like a spark in the dark. "I've faced worse than this," he whispered, his thumb brushing a raindrop from her cheek. "I've lost people I cared about, people I couldn't save. But I won't lose you. Not like that. Not to lies and fear." Her heart pounded painfully because no one had ever spoken to her with such raw honesty. No one had ever looked at her as if she was worth fighting for without expecting obedience in return. Before she could speak, a burst of static cracked through the air as the alien soldiers activated their scanners. Beams of bright violet cutting across the clearing like blades of light, moving inch by inch toward the rocky hiding place where she and Evan pressed huddled together. Liren stiffened, whispering urgently, "They're using life-tracking tech. It can detect heat signatures, Evan. It'll find you even if I mask my glow." Evan's brain raced, analyzing every possibility, every risk, every direction. Then his voice dropped to a low command. "You need to cover your markings. Fast." She hesitated only a second before pulling her soaked cloak tighter around her body, pressing it against her skin to hide the soft, luminescent trails that marked her as royal lineage. But it wasn't enough. The scanner beams drew closer. Sweeping through the rain with ruthless precision, Evan shifted and pulled her tightly into his chest, shielding her completely as he pressed his back to the rock. Using his own body to block her heat signature from the sensors, Liren gasped softly against him, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt. "Evan, stop. They'll detect you instead." "Better me than you," he whispered, no hesitation, no fear, only truth. The violet scanners passed within inches of his shoulder, lighting the edges of the rock. And Evan held his breath, his muscles iron still, his heart pounding like a muffled drum against Liren's cheek. For a few agonizing seconds, the world stopped. Rain frozen mid-air, breath suspended, fate balanced on a trembling thread. Then the scanner beam drifted past them, just barely, and the squad continued forward, unaware of the two lives pressed together in the darkness behind them. Liren let out a shaky breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her entire body trembling as she whispered, "You protected me with your own life. Why, Evan? Why would a human male do that for someone he barely knows?" Evan leaned his forehead gently against hers, the rain soft around them, the world narrowing to just their breaths mingling in the cold air. "Because knowing you is enough. he whispered, his voice filled with a quiet pain. Because you're kind and brave and smarter than you think. Because you trusted me even when you were terrified. Because you're not just someone I rescued. Liren. Her breath caught, her heart a wild, trembling thing inside her chest. You're someone I refuse to lose. The words hit her like warm light cutting through a frozen world, and she felt something inside her break free, something she had been taught to bury since childhood, something forbidden by her laws, her empire, her lineage. She didn't understand love. Her people didn't speak of it, but whatever lived in his eyes felt dangerously close to the stories humans used to describe it. Before she could answer, a sharp explosion tore through the forest. Bright light exploding across the treetops as a human distress flare shot into the sky. Evan's eyes widened, tension flooding his body. That wasn't me. Liren's markings flared with sudden fear. Then who set it off? A chilling realization struck them both at the same time. There was a third faction in the forest. Neither human military nor alien soldiers. Someone working in the shadows. Someone who wanted her for their own reasons. Torchlight flickered through the trees as a group of armored figures emerged. Their movements silent and predatory. Their symbols unfamiliar even to Liren. Evan slowly pulled her backward, his grip tightening protectively. His voice a whisper filled with steel. We're not alone anymore. Liren pressed closer to him, her breath trembling, her fear rising like a tidal wave. Evan, she whispered. Who are they? He didn't take his eyes off the approaching figures, his body shielding hers completely. I don't know, he whispered back, his voice dark with rising danger. But they're not here to rescue either of us. And as the forest lit with new threats and old hunting shadows, Liren realized something terrifying. Her people weren't the only danger. Someone else wanted her, and this time they wouldn't hesitate to kill Evan to take her. Rain poured in silver sheets through the forest canopy as Evan pressed himself against Liren, keeping her low, his breath steady, and his mind racing as the alien soldiers and the unknown faction closed in from every direction. Liren's chest heaved with fear, every muscle trembling as she clung to him, her markings flickering like soft fire in the dim light. And she realized with a piercing clarity that her life had never felt so fragile. Evan's eyes scanned the tree line with calculated intensity, every shadow a potential threat, every movement a signal of danger, and he knew that if he hesitated for even a second, it could mean both of their deaths. Stay close, he whispered, his voice low and unwavering. No matter what comes, we move together. She nodded, her hands gripping the fabric of his jacket, feeling the warmth and the unyielding determination that radiated from him, and for a fleeting moment she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. Explosions and flashes of light erupted around them as the alien soldiers engaged with the unknown faction, the clash of energy weapons and alien technology, illuminating the forest in bursts of crimson and violet. Evan pulled her forward through a narrow path between twisted roots, his steps sure and deliberate, each movement shielding her from view while he calculated the next move with the precision of someone who had fought countless battles. They won't stop, Liren whispered, her voice tight with fear. They will come until one of us falls. Evan shook his head, his jaw set. Then we make sure it's not us. A bright flare shot across the sky, catching both their eyes, and in its light, Liren saw the determination etched on Evan's face, a resolve that burned brighter than the rain, stronger than fear. Why do you care so much? She asked, her voice trembling. Why risk everything for me? Evan glanced at her as they ran, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, eyes soft but fierce. Because someone has to stand for what's right. Because I've lost people I cared about and I won't let that happen again because you're worth it. Her breath caught, and for a moment she didn't run, didn't think, just stared at him. The fear and awe and confusion of her entire life crashing together in a single heartbeat. The unknown faction emerged ahead, blocking their path. Sleek armored figures moving with deadly efficiency. Weapons raised, their intent clear in the way they advanced without hesitation. Evan shifted, his body moving in front of hers like a living shield. Hands steady on his weapons, voice low and commanding. Stay behind me. Liren nodded, trembling. The warmth of his presence grounding her, giving her courage she hadn't known she possessed. The first shots rang out, humming bolts of energy slicing through the rain, striking the trunks of trees and sending splintered wood flying. Evan pushed her behind a fallen log, his hands brushing her hair from her face. "Don't look away, stay with me." She nodded, watching as he moved, agile and precise, deflecting incoming fire, using the terrain, using his strength and cunning, a single human against impossible odds. Then Loren felt something shift inside her, a surge of courage and clarity that had been building since the crash, since the first moment. He saved her life. Since the first words of trust he had spoken, she realized she could not just be a passenger in this fight. She could not let him carry the burden alone. Drawing a deep breath, she focused on her markings, the soft light pulsing along her skin, and she concentrated, letting the power of her lineage flow through her. Energy sparked at her fingertips, small but potent as she aimed at the attackers, sending bolts that disrupted their formation, buying precious seconds. Evan's eyes widened in surprise and admiration, but he didn't hesitate. "Yes, Loren, use it." Now, together they moved as one, human and alien, skill and instinct blending, a dance of survival and defiance against impossible odds. The forest around them became a blur of rain, light, and motion, their bond strengthening with every coordinated movement, every glance, every whispered instruction. General Valerius appeared, towering and severe, his armor reflecting the flashes of energy, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Princess, step forward, you are coming with me." Loren froze, then looked at Evan, whose hand found hers in a grip both steady and unyielding. "We don't run," he whispered. Her chest tightened as she nodded, drawing strength from him, the fear melting into determination, the laws of her empire meaningless in the face of truth and choice. She stepped forward, markings glowing brightly, her voice strong and clear. "I choose my destiny, I choose my life. And I choose him." The soldiers faltered, the words carrying a weight no command could match. The unknown faction hesitated, and Evan's eyes met hers, a silent promise passing between them. General Valerius clenched his fists, fury and disbelief battling with his recognition of her resolve. But the Empire's laws could not command courage, could not command love, could not command the bond forged in fire and fear and choice. Evan and Loren moved together through the forest, each step a defiance, each heartbeat a statement, until the remaining threats faltered, confused by the unity and courage of the pair. The rain softened as dawn crept across the horizon, silver light breaking through the canopy, and for the first time in days, Loren felt hope bloom inside her chest. She looked at Evan, chest heaving, soaked and tired yet unbroken, and she whispered, "We survived." He smiled faintly, brushing her hair from her face. Together, the forest fell quiet behind them. A fragile peace, but the world beyond still waited, still watched, still challenged. Yet in that moment, human and alien, soldier and princess, stood together not as prey and hunter, but as equals, as protectors, as the architects of a new destiny. Loren realized the truth that would echo across galaxies. Humans did not devour their females. They fought for them, loved them, and sometimes they could change the fate of worlds with nothing more than courage and choice. And Evan Rhodes, a single human soldier, had chosen to defy history, laws, and fear, all to protect her. The storm passed, the rain softened, and a new dawn rose over two worlds beginning to see each other not as enemies, but as something greater. And as they walked hand in hand into the first light of day, Loren knew that nothing, not law, not empire, not fear, could undo the bond they had forged in fire, rain, and destiny.